The Bluetooth speaker crackled to life at 6:47 a.m., and Ethan Cole's voice cut through the kitchen silence like a blade through silk. Phase 1 is complete, Marco. Time to move to Phase 2. Talia Cole froze mid-sip of her coffee, the ceramic mug hovering inches from her lips. Her husband's voice drifted from the garage where he'd been sleeping for the past 3 weeks. But the words weren't meant for her ears. They were meant to destroy her world. "Copy that, boss," came Marco's gravelly response through the speaker. "The financial transfers went through last night. She's about to find out what broke really means." Ethan had left the speaker on purpose. Everything he'd done for the past month had been calculated, precise, methodical. Just like his military training had taught him 15 years ago in Afghanistan, where logistics specialists learned that the most devastating attacks came not from the front lines, but from cutting off supply chains. Talia's hands trembled as she set down the mug. Coffee splashed across the granite countertop she'd insisted on during their kitchen renovation 2 years ago, back when she still pretended to love him. Back when she hadn't started screwing her boss at Vexler Construction's executive retreat. The speaker went silent, but Ethan's message was crystal clear. The man she'd betrayed wasn't going to cry or beg. He was going to wage war. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan had returned from a routine security installation at a downtown office building to find his coworker, Danny Reeves, waiting by his truck in the company parking lot. Danny's face carried the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Ethan, we need to talk." "About what?" Ethan closed the truck door and shouldered his equipment bag. At 38, he'd learned to read people's body language like a technical manual. Danny was nervous, guilty, and struggling with something heavy. "About the retreat last weekend. The one you missed because of the Henderson job?" Ethan had volunteered for the weekend installation to avoid the company's annual executive retreat. Talia had been excited about it for months, talking about the luxury resort, the networking opportunities, the chance to impress the higher-ups. He'd supported her ambition, even helped her pick out the black cocktail dress that made her look stunning. "What about it?" Danny pulled out his phone, fingers hesitating over the screen. "Someone recorded some stuff. It's bad, man. Really bad." The video was 47 seconds long, shot from a second-floor balcony overlooking the resort's infinity pool at night. Talia was in the water with Damian Vexler, the company's CEO, along with a handful of other executives and their wives. The audio was muffled, but the visuals were crystal clear. Talia's hand disappeared beneath the water's surface. Damian's head tilted back, his mouth open in pleasure. The other people in the pool cheered and laughed like they were watching a show. Ethan watched the video twice without blinking. His face didn't change. Calm, composed, the same expression he'd worn when insurgents blew up his convoy's supply truck in Kandahar. Assess, adapt, execute. "Send it to my phone," he said, voice flat. Danny hesitated. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I know you guys have been—" "Send it to my phone, Danny," Ethan repeated, cutting him off. About 30 seconds later, the file transfer notification popped up on Ethan's screen. He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned toward the building entrance. Danny stared after him. "Where are you going?" Ethan didn't look back. "To finish my shift." That evening, Ethan sat in his truck in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the house he'd bought with Talia 5 years ago. The mortgage was in both their names, but he'd made every payment. The down payment had come from his military disability settlement. The renovations had been funded by his security consulting side jobs. Talia's BMW sat in the garage, a lease he'd co-signed for her promotion celebration 6 months ago. She'd kissed him that night, telling him how grateful she was for his support, how much she loved him, how they were building something beautiful together. He walked through the front door at 8:15 p.m. to find her in the living room, still in her work clothes, typing on her laptop. She looked up with a smile that had once made his chest tight with affection. Now it just looked like another lie. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" "Fine." He set his keys on the entry table and studied her face. No guilt, no nervousness, no tells at all. She was either a better actor than he'd given her credit for, or she genuinely didn't think she'd done anything wrong. "I made reservations at Romano's for Friday night. That new place you wanted to try." "Sounds good." He walked upstairs to their bedroom and opened her laptop bag. Her work iPad was inside, along with her backup phone, the one she thought he didn't know about. The device was locked, but Ethan had watched her enter the passcode hundreds of times. Muscle memory from 2 decades of military surveillance training. The text thread with Damian went back 4 months. It started professional, discussing project timelines and budget allocations. By month 2, it had shifted to personal observations and compliments. By month 3, they were exchanging photos. By month 4, they were coordinating secret meetings. The retreat had been their opportunity to go public within their inner circle. Talia had been auditioning for the role of CEO's mistress, and she'd gotten the part. Ethan photographed every relevant message, backed up the images to a secure cloud drive, and returned the phone to her bag. Then he went to his home office and began planning. The next morning, Ethan moved through his routine with mechanical precision. Coffee at 5:30 a.m., shower at 5:45, dressed and ready for work by 6:15. He kissed Talia goodbye like he had every morning for 8 years, tasting the lie on her lips. At the office, Ethan found Marco Dunn installing security cameras in the break room. Marco, built like a linebacker at 41, had spent 3 years in state prison for armed robbery before turning things around in construction security. He was also the only person at Wexler Construction who knew about Ethan's military past. "Need a hand?" Ethan asked, stepping into the room. Marco didn't look down from the bracket he was tightening. "Always. These new cameras are supposed to be tamper-proof, but I give it 2 weeks before some genius figures out how to spray paint the lenses." They worked in comfortable silence for about 20 minutes, until Ethan spoke again while feeding a cable through the ceiling tile. "Marco, hypothetically, if someone needed to document infidelity for divorce proceedings, what would be the best approach?" Marco froze, one hand still on the camera housing. "Hypothetically," Ethan nodded, keeping his tone casual. "Hypothetically." Marco returned to his work, slower this time. "Well, hypothetically, I'd say start with digital evidence. Phone records, social media activity, financial transactions, then move to physical surveillance. But they'd need to be careful. Privacy laws can be tricky." Ethan tightened a screw, then asked, "What about assets?" "That's where it gets interesting," Marco said, lowering the drill. "Most people don't realize how much control they actually have over joint accounts and property if they move fast enough. Of course, you'd need someone who understands the legal system." "Thanks for the hypothetical advice," Ethan said with a faint smile. Marco gave him a knowing glance. "Anytime, hypothetically." That afternoon, Ethan sat across from his lawyer, Jennifer Park. She'd handled both his disability claim and the purchase of his house. Competent, discreet, and known for creative legal strategies, she was exactly who he needed now. "I need to understand my options," he said, sliding a folder across her desk. "My wife is having an affair with her boss. I want to know what I'm entitled to in a divorce." Jennifer took her time reviewing the documents. When she finally looked up, her expression was sharp, carnivory. "This is very thorough documentation," she said. "How long have you been gathering it?" 2 days, Ethan replied. She raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Impressive. Now about your options. Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity can still influence how property gets divided, especially if marital assets were used to support the affair. Do you have access to your wife's expense reports?" "I can get them," he said without hesitation. "Good. Also, I noticed you signed a post-nuptial agreement 3 years ago. Do you remember the terms?" Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile, the first in nearly 2 days. "I remember everything. The postnup had been Talia's idea, pushed by her financial advisor after a big promotion. She'd wanted to protect her career earnings, but in focusing so tightly on her income, she'd neglected the property clauses. The agreement granted Ethan sole ownership of the house and all improvements made during the marriage. Jennifer closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "This is actually quite favorable to you," she said. "She essentially signed away her claim to your primary asset." "She was ambitious," Ethan said quietly. "Sometimes ambitious people make mistakes," Jennifer nodded. "Indeed, I'll need a retainer of $5,000 to begin proceedings." Ethan wrote the check from his personal account. The money came from his security consulting business, which Talia had never shown interest in understanding. She'd been too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice her husband building his own. 2 weeks into his surveillance operation, Ethan had compiled a comprehensive dossier on his wife's affair. Talia and Damien met twice a week at the Marriott downtown. She charged the room service to her corporate credit card, listing it as client entertainment. Damien expensed his half as strategic planning sessions. They were stealing from the company to fund their infidelity. It was amateur hour, but it was also documented proof of fraud. Ethan printed screenshots of the hotel receipts, credit card statements, and text messages. He compiled everything into a neat folder and mailed it anonymously to Wexler Construction's board of directors, along with a typed note. "Thought you should know how your executives are spending company money." The explosion came 3 days later. Ethan was installing motion sensors in the company's main conference room when he heard shouting from the executive floor. Through the security camera feeds, he watched Damien Wexler storm into the HR director's office, his face red with rage. "Who the hell sent this?" Damien's voice carried through the building's ventilation system. "We're conducting a full investigation," came the measured response from Susan Martinez, the HR director. "Until then, you're suspended pending review." "This is BS. Some disgruntled employee is trying to sabotage me. The documentation appears legitimate. We've verified the receipts with the hotel and your credit card company." Ethan switched camera angles to watch Damien's face collapse. The CEO had gone from hunter to prey in the span of a conversation. That evening, Talia came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her usual professional composure had cracked, revealing the panic underneath. "There's been a situation at work," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "What kind of situation?" "Someone sent anonymous evidence to the board about inappropriate use of company resources." Ethan set down his dinner fork and gave her his full attention. "That sounds serious." "It is. Damien's been suspended. There's going to be an investigation." "Are you involved?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Talia's shoulders tensed, her breathing shallow. She was trying to decide how much to tell him. "Some of the evidence involves me, but it's not what it looks like." "What does it look like?" Like we were." She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Having an affair?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Her face went white, then red, then white again. "Ethan, I can explain. Can you?" He stood up slowly, his voice perfectly calm. "Can you explain the hotel receipts, the text messages, the video from the retreat?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. What video?" Ethan pulled out his phone and hit play. The screen glowed with the 47 seconds that had started everything. Across from him, Talia watched herself on video, laughing, performing for Damien Wexler and his friends, her hands slipping beneath the water as strangers cheered. When it ended, she was crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on her. "How was it supposed to happen?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't plan it. It just happened." He nodded slowly, his tone cold and deliberate. "Things don't just happen, Talia. People make choices. You chose to sleep with your boss. You chose to steal from your company. You chose to humiliate me in front of your coworkers." "It's not like that," she tried, but he cut her off. "Then what is it like?" She broke down completely then, mascara streaking her cheeks, her shoulders trembling. "I felt trapped," she sobbed. "Like I was disappearing. Damien made me feel important, special, like I mattered." Ethan's voice was quiet. "You mattered to me. I know," Talia choked out. "I know you loved me, but it wasn't enough. I needed more." He turned and walked toward the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard, the place where they'd once talked about planting a garden, about children, about building a life together. A life she had burned down for a few fleeting moments of validation. "Pack a bag," he said, still facing the glass. "What?" Her voice cracked in disbelief. "Pack a bag," Ethan repeated. "You're staying somewhere else tonight." Talia took a step toward him. "Ethan, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling." "No, we can't." He turned to face her fully now, and the look in his eyes made her flinch. "You eliminated us, Talia. You eliminated everything we built together. Now you get to live with the consequences." She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his expression made the words die in her throat. This wasn't the man she'd married. This wasn't the partner who had supported her dreams or celebrated her victories. This was someone else, someone dangerous. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. 3 weeks, Ethan replied. 3 weeks? Her voice rose. "You've known for 3 weeks and you didn't say anything?" "I was gathering intelligence," he said coolly. "Making plans, preparing for war." "War? Against who?" He smiled then, and it chilled her to the bone. "Against you." The next morning, Talia woke up in a Hampton Inn, alone. Her corporate credit card had been declined at checkout. Her company car was gone from the parking lot, repossessed in the night. Her building access had been revoked. Her work phone wiped clean. In a panic, She dialed Ethan's number from the courtesy phone in the hotel lobby. Her personal cell had already been disconnected. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "I made some calls," Ethan replied calmly, shared some information, pointed out a few financial irregularities. "You destroyed my career," she said. He didn't hesitate. "You destroyed our marriage." "I'm just returning the favor." Talia's voice dropped into a warning. "This isn't over." "No," Ethan said quietly. "It's just beginning." He hung up and went back to his coffee. He was sitting in the kitchen of the house that was now legally his, reviewing the financial statements Marco had helped him compile. Over the past month, he'd methodically transferred money from their joint accounts to his personal accounts, using perfectly legal withdrawals that stayed below the threshold for automatic notifications. The mortgage, utilities, and insurance were all in his name. The BMW lease was jointly held, but he'd contacted the dealership to explain that his wife was no longer authorized to make payments. They'd agreed to repossess the vehicle rather than risk default. Talia's credit cards were tied to accounts he controlled. Her gym membership, her subscription services, her professional association dues, all of it flowed through their joint finances. With a few phone calls, he'd cut off her access to the infrastructure of her life. His phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Phase 2 complete. She's officially homeless. Ethan had worked with Marco to purchase Talia's apartment lease from her landlord. The building was owned by a construction company that did business with Vexler Construction. A little networking, a cash offer, and some strategic timing had been enough to convince the landlord to terminate her lease for breach of contract. The breach was real. She'd been subletting the apartment to other women from her office for weekend stays, violating the terms of her lease agreement. Another piece of evidence that Marco had helped him gather. Ethan's phone rang and Jennifer Park's name lit up the screen. He answered immediately. "Good morning, Jennifer," he said. "Good morning, Ethan. I have news about your wife's employment situation," she replied. He didn't hesitate. "She's been terminated?" "Officially, she resigned," Jennifer explained. "Unofficially, it was resign or be prosecuted for fraud. The company's cutting ties with everyone involved in the expense account scandal." "What about Damien?" Ethan asked, his voice tightening. "Fired yesterday. The board voted unanimously," she said. "He's also being sued by the company for restitution of misappropriated funds." A sense of satisfaction flickered through Ethan, cold and precise, like when a well-executed logistics operation snapped into place. Every variable accounted for, every outcome predicted, every threat neutralized. "There's something else," Jennifer added, her tone shifting. "Your wife has hired an attorney, Harold Steinberg. He's expensive and aggressive." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, she can't afford him." "That's the interesting part. Someone's funding her legal defense. We're trying to find out who." He didn't need to ask, he already knew. Damien Vexler was trying to buy his way out of the fallout, backing Talia so she couldn't testify against him. If she had solid legal representation, she might negotiate immunity in exchange for silence. "Jennifer, I need you to accelerate the divorce proceedings," Ethan said firmly. "File for immediate dissolution on grounds of infidelity." "That's aggressive," she warned. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, and I want to invoke the postnuptial agreement." "Full enforcement." There was a pause. "That will leave her with essentially nothing." Ethan's voice was like ice. "That's the point." 3 days later, Ethan was in the Vexler construction parking lot, replacing a broken security camera, when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up beside his truck. A tall man stepped out, immaculately dressed and unmistakably confident. He looked like Central Casting's idea of a ruthless divorce attorney. "Mr. Cole," the man called out. "I'm Harold Steinberg. I represent your wife." Ethan didn't look down from the camera mount. "Congratulations," he muttered. "I'd like to discuss a settlement arrangement," Steinberg said, stepping closer. "I'm listening." "My client is willing to accept a 50-50 split of marital assets," the attorney began, "in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. No public proceedings, no messy testimonies, no embarrassing revelations." Ethan let out a short, dry laugh. "Your client doesn't have any leverage for negotiations." Steinberg's smile was cold and practiced. "Actually, she does. She's pregnant." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Ethan froze. Slowly, he lowered his tools and turned to face the man. "Pregnant?" he asked. 6 weeks, Steinberg confirmed. "She took a test yesterday. Under Texas law, you're presumed to be the father of any child born during the marriage." Ethan's mind spun through the timeline. 6 weeks ago, he and Talia were still sharing a bed. They'd had sex twice that week, trying to salvage what he'd thought was just a rough patch. She'd been unusually affectionate, almost desperate. She'd been buying herself time. Of course, Steinberg continued, paternity can be established through testing, but that takes time. And until then, you're legally responsible for child support. Ethan's jaw clenched. What does she want? The house, Steinberg replied. Half of your business, half of your retirement accounts, and $5,000 a month in spousal support. Ethan set his tools aside and stepped down from the ladder. He walked straight toward the attorney, forcing Steinberg to take a cautious step back. Tell your client, Ethan said quietly, that I'll see her in court. And tell her this. If she tries to use this pregnancy as a weapon, I will make sure the entire story becomes public record. The affairs, the fraud, the hotel receipts, the videos, every single detail. Steinberg straightened. Are you threatening my client? Ethan's voice was razor sharp. I'm making her a promise. If she wants to play hardball, that's fine. But she's not going to like how this game ends. Steinberg got back in his Mercedes and drove away. Ethan finished installing the security camera, then sat in his truck and called Marco. I need a favor. Name it. I need you to find out who's been helping Talia. Someone's paying for her lawyer and her hotel room. Someone with money and motivation. You think it's the CEO? I know it's the CEO. I need proof. Give me 48 hours. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his quiet house, the walls echoing with memories of the woman he'd once believed he knew. He thought about the times Talia had sat with him through panic attacks, steadied him when PTSD clawed its way to the surface. He remembered how they'd built his security consulting business together, talked about starting a family when the timing was right. Now she was pregnant, and he didn't know if the child was his or Damien Vexler's. The timeline left both possibilities equally plausible. His phone buzzed. A text flashed across the screen from an unknown number. We need to talk. Ethan stared at it for a moment, then typed back. No, we don't. Another message appeared seconds later. Please, I can explain everything. He didn't hesitate. There's nothing to explain. You made your choices. A pause, and then, the baby might be yours. That one made him stop. His thumb hovered above the screen as he sat still, breathing slow and deep. Finally, he responded. Then prove it. Marco's investigation into the source of Talia's legal funding wrapped up in 36 hours, 12 sooner than promised. He laid out the findings across Ethan's kitchen table, spreading pages of account ledgers, wire transfers, and front company names. Your boy's been busy, Marco said, tapping a printout. He's paying for everything. Her lawyer, hotel meals, even new clothes. Spent about 30 grand so far. He's trying to buy her silence, Ethan muttered, flipping through the papers. That's what I figured. But here's the interesting part. He's also been meeting with some of the other employees. Sienna Shaw, Mike Torres, Lisa Chen. Ethan looked up. He knew those names. That's his inner circle. The ones from the retreat. The ones who stood there and cheered while she... Yeah, Marco cut in, nodding. They're coordinating their stories, trying to keep things tidy. Or trying to pin it all on someone else, Ethan said, jaw tightening. Marco gave a grim smile. That's where it gets fun. I've been talking to other employees quietly. Turns out your wife wasn't Damien's first conquest, not even close. He's been working his way through the female staff for years. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Sexual maltreatment? Worse. Coercion, quid pro quo crap. Sleep with me or your career stalls. A few of the women are ready to talk. They've been sitting on this a long time. Ethan felt his military instincts re-engage. Clear, clinical. The enemy's position, resources, and tactics were now visible. It was time to strike. I need to talk to these women, Marco nodded. Already arranged, tomorrow night, neutral location. They want to hear what you've got to say. The meeting took place in a quiet coffee shop in downtown Austin. 5 women sat around a large corner table, their expressions wary but alert. They ranged in age from 25 to 45. All had worked for Vexler Construction. All had the same story. He started with compliments, said Patricia Hendricks, the oldest. Then came the private meetings. Then the implications that my career advancement depended on how flexible I was. Did you ever report him? Ethan asked. Patricia gave a tired laugh. To who? HR works for him. The board called him a visionary, and he was smart, never anything in writing. Always just enough deniability. Ashley Martin, the youngest in the group, spoke next. She couldn't have been more than 23. He told me successful women at the company knew how to build personal relationships with leadership. When I said I had a boyfriend, he smiled and said that meant I could be discreet. Each woman's story carried the same pattern: praise, manipulation, isolation, and abandonment once Damien moved on to the next. Ethan listened carefully. Talia, he said finally, was just the latest, but she wasn't like the rest of you. She wasn't coerced. Ashley glanced at him. What do you want from us? I want you to tell your stories, Ethan said. Officially, on the record. To who? Patricia asked cautiously. The State Attorney General's office, Department of Labor, the press, anyone who will listen, he answered. Patricia leaned back, arms crossed. That's a big risk. Damien has lawyers. He has money. Connections. Not anymore, Ethan said firmly. He's been fired. His assets are frozen. His reputation's in ruins. He's just another hunter without protection. The women exchanged looks. Fear still lingered, but something else had begun to rise too. Anger. Determination. Ashley's voice was tentative. What about your wife? She's part of this too. She'll face the consequences of her choices, Ethan said quietly, just like everyone else. The coordinated attack began on a Monday morning. By noon, the Texas Attorney General's office had received detailed complaints from 7 women alleging a pattern of sexual maltreatment and coercion at Vexler Construction. The Department of Labor had opened an investigation into the company's employment practices, and 3 different news outlets had received comprehensive documentation of the scandal. By evening, Damien Vexler's name was trending on social media. Ethan sat in his home office, eyes fixed on the screen as he monitored news feeds and social media chatter. The story was spreading faster than he'd anticipated. Corporate corruption, sexual maltreatment, executive misconduct. It was the kind of scandal journalists couldn't resist, and online commentators were already dissecting every detail. His phone rang. Talia's name lit up the display. He answered, keeping his voice even. Talia! Her voice trembled with rage. What have you done? I've told the truth, he said calmly. Something you never tried. You've destroyed everything, she snapped. My career, my reputation, my future. Ethan didn't flinch. You destroyed those things yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it. The reporters are calling me, she said, voice rising. They want statements. They want interviews. Then give them interviews, he replied without sympathy. Tell them about your relationship with Damien, about the hotel rooms, the corporate credit cards, the retreat. I can't, she said quickly. If I talk, they'll crucify me. Then don't talk, Ethan said, his tone unchanging. But understand, your silence won't protect you. The story's already out there. There was a long pause on the line. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. The raw anger had been replaced by something colder, sharper. I'm not going down alone, Ethan, she said. If you destroy me, I'll take you with me. He leaned back in his chair, mildly amused. How? I know things about you, about your business, about the military contracts you've been working on, the security clearances you've been using. Ethan smiled, recognizing the bluff for what it was. What things exactly? The Henderson job, Talia said. The one you used to get out of the retreat. You weren't installing security systems. You were conducting industrial espionage. That's an interesting theory, he replied. Do you have proof? I have enough, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. No, Ethan said firmly. You don't, because it's not true. But even if it were, you'd have to explain how you know about classified government contracts. You'd have to admit you've been spying on your husband's business for months. Another pause. This one stretched longer. He could practically hear her recalculating. I'm pregnant, Ethan, she said at last, softer now. Doesn't that mean anything to you? He didn't hesitate. It means you're going to be a single mother, assuming the child is yours to raise. Her breath caught. What's that supposed to mean? It means that when the paternity test comes back, he said, his voice turning colder, and we find out the father is Damien Vexler, he'll be the one legally responsible for child support. And given his current financial situation, that's not going to be much. You fool, Talia hissed. I'm the fool? Ethan shot back. I'm not the one who cheated. I'm not the one who stole from my employer. And I'm not the one pregnant with my boss's child. You don't know whose child it is, she said, her voice wavering. I will soon, he replied. And so will everyone else. The paternity test will be part of the divorce proceedings. Public record. There was no response. Just the quiet click of the call ending. She'd hung up. Ethan set down his phone and returned to his computer. The news coverage was accelerating. An investigative journalist named Sarah Watson had picked up the story and was doing deep dive reporting on Vexler Construction's corporate culture. She'd already interviewed 3 of the women who'd attended the coffee shop meeting. His phone buzzed with a text from Marco. "Damien's been arrested. Fraud charges. Thought you'd want to know." Ethan typed back. "What about the others?" "Sienna Shaw's been fired. Mike Torres is cooperating with investigators. Lisa Chen's disappeared. And Talia? Still at the Hampton Inn, still spending Damien's money. Not for much longer." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Damien Vexler had been found dead in his jail cell, an apparent self-destruction. According to reports, he'd used his belt during the night shift change when the guards were distracted. Ethan read the headline on his phone while drinking black coffee at his kitchen table. He felt no satisfaction, no closure, just the quiet acknowledgement that one variable had been removed from the equation. His phone rang. Jennifer Park's name appeared on the screen. "Have you seen the news?" she asked as soon as he answered. "Just now," Ethan said. "This changes your legal situation significantly," she told him. "If Damien was the father of your wife's child, his passing means there's no one to pursue for child support. That financial burden would fall on you. Unless the child isn't mine." "Unless it's not," Jennifer agreed. "When do you want to schedule the paternity test?" "As soon as possible." "I'll make the arrangements," she said. "There's something else. Damien's passing has triggered a clause in his estate plan. All of his assets are frozen pending a criminal investigation, including the funds he was using to support your wife." "She's cut off?" Ethan asked. "Completely. Her attorney already filed a motion to withdraw. She can't pay him." Ethan didn't smile, but he felt the quiet strategic satisfaction of a plan unfolding exactly as intended. "Schedule the test for next week," he said, "and accelerate the divorce proceedings. I want this finished." That afternoon, Ethan drove to the Hampton Inn where Talia had been staying. He found her outside in the parking lot, stuffing suitcases into the trunk of a dented Honda Civic he didn't recognize. "Nice car," he remarked, stepping closer. She looked up. Her face was puffy, eyes rimmed red. "It's a rental," she said. "The cheapest I could find." "Where are you going?" "I don't know. Somewhere I can afford. Somewhere I can start over." He nodded toward her stomach. "What about the baby? What about it? Are you keeping it?" Straightening up, she met his gaze with a flicker of her old defiance. "That's none of your business." "If it's my child," Ethan said calmly, "it's absolutely my business. And if it's not, then it's not." They stood in silence, 3 feet of cracked asphalt between them, and 8 years of marriage hanging in the space. "I never meant for it to happen this way," Talia said softly. "How did you mean for it to happen?" he asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. I thought I could have both, the marriage and the excitement, the security and the passion." "That's not how life works." "I know that now." "Do you?" Ethan asked. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're still making the same mistakes. Still hoping someone else will clean up that mess." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're 29, Talia. You have a degree, solid experience, and you're not stupid. But instead of taking responsibility, you're still playing the sufferer." "I am a sufferer," she insisted. "Of you, of Damien, of this entire mess." "No," he said. "You're a participant. You made choices. You created consequences. And now you live with them." Her voice cracked. "What about the baby?" "What about it? If it's mine, I'll step up. If it's not, it's your responsibility." She stared at him, trembling. "How can you be so cold?" "Because cold is what works," Ethan said. "Cold keeps me from making the same mistake twice." Without another word, he turned and walked back to his truck. In the rearview mirror, he saw her slump against the driver's side door, burying her face in her hands. He felt nothing. The paternity test was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a clinic in downtown Austin. Ethan arrived early, flipping through a magazine he wasn't reading. 10 minutes after the appointment time, Talia entered, looking exhausted and pale. She sat down across from him. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "I've been ready for months," he said. She hesitated. "What if it's yours? Then I'll be a father. And if it's not, then I won't." The procedure was simple. Cheek swabs, a vial of blood, signatures on a few forms. The technician glanced between them. "How would you like to receive the results?" "Separate calls," Ethan said. "Same time. 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon?" "Perfect." They left separately. Ethan returned to work, installing cameras at a new office site. Talia drove off in the rental car to whatever place she was calling home now. The next 3 days passed like a slow-motion countdown. Ethan kept busy, working, eating, sleeping, but beneath it all, he waited. He didn't plan for what came next. He just waited. On Friday afternoon, he sat in his truck at the job site, watching the time on his phone tick to 3 p.m. Right on cue, it rang. "Mr. Cole," a voice said, "this is Dr. Martinez from the testing facility. I have your paternity results." "I'm listening," Ethan replied. "The probability of paternity is 0%, the doctor said. You are not the biological father of Mrs. Cole's child." Ethan closed his eyes and let out a long breath. No joy, no vindication, just relief, pure and clean. "Thank you, doctor. You'll receive the paperwork within 48 hours. Have a good day." He ended the call and sat still for a few minutes, letting the truth settle. Then he dialed Jennifer Park. "The test came back negative," he said. "Congratulations," she replied. "That simplifies everything. No child support, no custody issues, no future obligations. When can we finalize the divorce?" "I'll have the papers ready by Monday," she said. "Given the postnup and the infidelity documentation, it'll be clean." "Good," Ethan said. "I want this finished." "There's one more thing," Jennifer added. "The criminal investigation into Vexler Construction is expanding. They're reviewing everyone tied to the expense account fraud. Your wife might be facing charges. That's not my problem anymore." "No, it's not," she agreed. "But be prepared. People facing charges sometimes get desperate." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll handle it." That evening, Ethan sat in his house, and for the first time in months, allowed himself to think about the future. The divorce would be finalized within weeks. The house was his. The business was his. The money was his. He was free. His phone buzzed on the table beside him. A text lit up from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's important." Ethan stared at the screen, then typed back, "No, we don't." Talia responded almost instantly. "Please, I'm in trouble." He didn't bother hiding his cynicism. "I know. You've been in trouble for months. The police want to question me about the fraud, about Damien, then answer their questions. I need help. I need someone who understands. You need a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. That's not my problem." There was a pause before her next message appeared. "Ethan, please. I'm scared." He stared at that final message for a long time before replying. "You should be." The knock on the door came at 9:30 p.m. Rain tapped against the windows as Ethan crossed the living room, glanced through the peephole, and saw her, Talia, standing on the porch, drenched from head to toe. She looked thinner than he remembered, worn down. Her face was pale and tight with exhaustion. He opened the door but made no move to let her in. "What do you want?" he asked. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shivering as much from emotion as from the cold. "We have nothing to talk about." Her shoulders sank. "The police arrested me today. Fraud, conspiracy, lying to federal investigators." "I know," Ethan said flatly. "I saw the news. They're saying I could go to prison. 5 to 10 years. That's unfortunate." "Ethan, please." Her voice cracked. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything we had, but I'm begging you to help me." He crossed his arms. "How?" "Testify for me," she said quickly. "Tell them I was manipulated, that I was a sufferer of Damien's coercion." Ethan looked her in the eye. "Were you?" Talia hesitated. I don't know, maybe, at first. But not at the end," he said. "No." Her voice dropped. "Not at the end." "Then I can't help you." "You could if you wanted to," she said. "You have influence. You have contacts, money, power." "I have all of those things because I earned them," Ethan replied. "Because I made smart choices. Because I didn't throw away my life for a few nights of excitement." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. I'm going to have a baby. In prison. It's not my baby." "I know," she admitted. "But it's still a baby. An innocent child," he asked quietly. "Whose child?" "Damien's." "Damien's dead," Ethan said. "I know," she whispered. "I know he's dead, but this baby is still coming, and I'm still going to be its mother." "That's your choice to make." Talia stepped forward. "Help me, Ethan. Please. For the sake of who we used to be." He didn't move. "Who we used to be doesn't exist anymore. You eliminated that person. You eliminated that marriage. You eliminated that future. I can't do this alone, she said. You should have thought of that before you destroyed your life. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I'm just asking for help. And I'm telling you no. Rain streamed down her face, mixing with silent tears he couldn't see in the dark. She stood in the downpour, motionless. I loved you, she said. I really did love you. Ethan's voice was low. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. You loved the safety, the stability. But you didn't love me. If you had, you never would have betrayed me. You're right. She swallowed hard. I didn't love you the way you deserved, but I'm not the only one who's changed. Her gaze hardened. Look at yourself, Ethan. Look at what you've become. I've become someone who can't be betrayed twice. You've become someone who can't love at all. He shrugged. Maybe that's better. Is it? She asked. Is this cold, empty revenge really what you wanted? It's what I needed. And what do you need now? I need you to leave, he said. I need you to face your consequences. I need you to disappear from my life. What about the baby? She asked, barely above a whisper. What about it? Doesn't it deserve better than this? Ethan's voice was steady. The baby deserves a mother who makes better choices. That's not my responsibility. You're right, she said quietly. She turned to go, pausing just once before reaching the car. I hope you find happiness, Ethan, she said. I hope you find peace. I already have. No, you haven't, she replied. You've found revenge. They're not the same thing. She walked back to her car, a different rental than the one he'd seen before. Older, cheaper, more desperate. She drove away without looking back. Ethan closed the door and returned to his living room. The house was quiet, empty, exactly the way he wanted it. He had won. He had achieved everything he'd planned, executed every strategy, neutralized every threat. So, why did he feel so hollow? 6 months later, Ethan sat in a coffee shop in downtown Austin reading the newspaper. The headline on the business section read, Former Vexler construction employee sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud. Talia had been convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy, fraud, and embezzlement. She'd given birth to her daughter, Damien's daughter, in county jail, and the child had been placed in foster care pending the resolution of custody issues. The newspaper article was brief, clinical, focused on the legal proceedings rather than the human cost. It mentioned that the defendant had been unable to afford adequate legal representation, that she'd accepted a plea bargain to avoid a longer sentence, that she'd expressed remorse for her actions. It didn't mention that she'd once been married to a man who loved her. It didn't mention the house they'd shared, the dreams they'd planned, the future they'd destroyed. It didn't mention that she'd been someone's wife, someone's partner, someone's world. Ethan folded the newspaper and set it aside. He'd been expecting this outcome for months, but seeing it in print felt different. Final, absolute. His phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Saw the news. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Ethan typed back. Want to grab a beer tonight? Talk about it? Nothing to talk about. Come on, man. This is heavy stuff. You don't have to carry it alone. I said I'm fine. Okay, but I'm here if you need me. Ethan put his phone away and walked to his truck. He drove through the city, past the office buildings where he'd installed security systems, past the construction sites where he'd worked, past the hotel where Talia had conducted her affair. He ended up at the house, his house, sitting in the driveway, looking at the windows of the rooms where they'd lived together, the kitchen where they'd cooked meals, the living room where they'd watched movies, the bedroom where they'd made love and planned their future. All of it was his now. All of it was empty. He walked through the front door and stood in the entry hall, listening to the silence. The house was exactly as he'd left it, perfectly organized, efficiently maintained, completely lifeless. On the kitchen counter, he found an envelope that had been delivered while he was out. His name was written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short message. Mr. Cole, I am a social worker with the Texas Department of Family Services. I am writing to inform you that baby girl Vexler has been placed in foster care following her mother's incarceration. While you're not the biological father, you were married to the mother at the time of conception. If you are interested in pursuing custody or visitation, please contact my office. Susan Williams, LCSW. Ethan read the letter twice, then set it on the counter. The baby, Damien's baby, was alone in the system, another casualty of her parents' choices. She was innocent, blameless, deserving of love and stability. She was also a reminder of everything he'd lost. He walked to his home office and sat at his desk, staring at the computer screen. He had work to do, contracts to fulfill, a business to run. He had built a life that was orderly, profitable, and completely under his control. He had everything he'd planned for, everything he'd worked toward, everything except the one thing that had made any of it matter. 1 year later, Ethan's security consulting business had expanded to include 3 full-time employees and contracts throughout Central Texas. He'd moved to a larger office, bought a new truck, and established himself as one of the most reliable security contractors in the region. He worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. He was successful, respected, and utterly alone. On a Thursday morning in March, Ethan was installing cameras at a new client's office when his phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. He answered. "Ethan Cole." A professional voice came through the line. "Mr. Cole, this is Susan Williams from the Texas Department of Family Services. We spoke about a year ago regarding baby girl Vexler." "I remember," he said. "I'm calling because the child's foster placement has fallen through," she explained. "We're looking for alternative arrangements." Ethan frowned. "What does that have to do with me?" "You were married to the mother at the time of conception," Susan replied. "Under Texas law, that gives you legal standing to petition for custody, if you're interested." "I'm not the biological father," he reminded her. "No," she acknowledged, "but you do have legal standing. I wanted to give you the opportunity to consider it." "I'm not interested," Ethan said firmly. "I understand," Susan said gently, "but she's a beautiful child, Mr. Cole. Healthy, intelligent, well-developed. She deserves a stable home." "She deserves a lot of things," he said. "That doesn't make me responsible for providing them." "Of course not. But sometimes responsibility isn't about what we owe others," she said. "Sometimes it's about what we owe ourselves." Ethan didn't answer. He simply ended the call and went back to work. But the words followed him through the rest of the day, trailing behind every camera cable and echoing in every quiet moment. A baby girl, born into chaos, connected to the man who had destroyed his marriage, and now abandoned by the system that had tried to protect her. That evening, Ethan sat in his silent house and picked up the phone. "I need to talk to someone," he said when Marco answered. "I'll be right over." 30 minutes later, Marco showed up with a six-pack and the steady expression of a man who had seen this coming for a long time. "You look like hell," Marco said, stepping inside. "I feel like hell," Ethan muttered. Marco cracked open 2 beers and handed one to him. "Want to talk about it?" "I don't know where to start." "Start with what's bothering you." "Everything. Nothing. I got everything I wanted, Marco. I destroyed the people who betrayed me. I kept my assets. I won." Marco leaned forward. But I'm miserable," Ethan admitted. "I'm angry all the time. I can't sleep. I can't focus. I feel like I'm drowning in my own success." "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" Marco asked. "Something that wasn't about work or revenge or proving a point." Ethan stared at the floor. "I don't know. I don't remember." "And when's the last time you laughed? I mean, really laughed?" "I don't know that either." Marco sat back. "You've spent the last 2 years at war, Ethan. You've been so focused on defeating your enemies, you never figured out what came after the war." "I wanted my life back." "No," Marco said. "You wanted your old life back, the one where you trusted people, believed in love, had hope. That life is gone." "Maybe," Marco agreed. "But that doesn't mean you can't build a new one." Ethan looked up. "How?" "By making choices that aren't about anger," Marco said. "By doing things that matter. By helping people instead of hurting them." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "Like what?" "Like that baby girl who needs a home." Ethan blinked. "You know about her?" "I know about everything," Marco said quietly. "I've been watching you destroy yourself for 2 years, waiting for you to realize that revenge isn't the same as justice." "I'm not her father." "No," Marco said. "But you could be. You could be the one thing in that child's life that breaks the cycle. The one person who turns all this pain into something better." "I don't know how to be a father." "Nobody does," Marco said. "You learn as you go." "What if I'm bad at it?" "What if you're not?" They sat in silence, each lost in his own thoughts, the beer slowly warming in their hands. "I hurt people, Marco," Ethan said quietly. "I destroyed lives. I became something I never wanted to be." "You became what you needed to be to survive," Marco replied. But surviving isn't the same as living. I don't know if I remember how to live. Then learn, Marco said. Start with one small choice, one act of kindness, one moment of hope. Ethan stared at the floor again, then looked up. The baby? Marco nodded. The baby? The next morning, Ethan dialed the number from his call log. Susan Williams picked up. At Texas Department of Family Services. This is Susan. I want to meet her, Ethan said. The child? She asked, surprised. Yes, I want to meet her before I make any decisions. I can arrange a visit this afternoon, if you're available. I'm available. The foster care facility was a converted house in East Austin, painted yellow with a playground in the backyard. Susan Williams met him at the front door, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She's in the nursery, she said, leading him through a hallway lined with children's artwork. Fair warning, she's going through a difficult phase. The placement disruption was hard on her. The nursery was bright and cheerful, filled with toys and books and the sounds of children playing. In the corner, a little girl sat by herself, stacking blocks with intense concentration. She was 18 months old, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. She looked nothing like Talia and nothing like Damien. She looked like herself. That's her, Susan said. We call her Amy, but that's not her legal name yet. What is her legal name? She doesn't have one. Her mother never completed the paperwork. Ethan walked over to where the little girl was playing. She looked up at him with curious eyes, unafraid but cautious. Hello, he said. She studied his face for a moment, then offered him a block. Thank you, he said, taking it. She smiled, a real smile, bright and genuine, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 2 years began to thaw. She likes you, Susan said. That's unusual. She's been very withdrawn since the placement disruption. What would I need to do? If I wanted to pursue custody? Background checks, home study, financial evaluation, psychological assessment. The process usually takes 6 to 8 months. And in the meantime, she stays in foster care, unless you wanted to pursue emergency placement as a kinship caregiver. I'm not family. No, but you have legal standing as the former spouse of her mother. If you're serious about this, I can expedite the process. Ethan looked at the little girl, who was now building a tower with her blocks on the colorful rug. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, tiny hands carefully aligning each piece. She was focused, determined, completely absorbed in her task. She's going to be smart, he thought. She's going to be strong. I'm serious, he said quietly, his gaze still on her. Across the room, Susan Williams nodded. Good. We'll need to start with paperwork. Lots of paperwork. I can handle paperwork, Ethan replied. I know you can, Susan said with a faint smile. I've reviewed your file. Military background, successful business, stable housing, clean record. You're actually an ideal candidate. He glanced at her. Even with the circumstances? Especially with the circumstances, she said. You're choosing to love a child who isn't biologically yours. That takes character. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he knelt beside the child, Amy, and helped her stack another block. He spent the next hour there on the floor, reading picture books, building towers, laughing as she knocked them down and clapped in delight. He listened to her giggle, to the small rhythms of her world. For the first time in years, something inside him softened. When it was time to go, Amy clung to his leg and started to cry. She doesn't want you to leave, Susan observed gently. I don't want to go either, Ethan admitted. Then come back tomorrow, she suggested. And the day after that. Build a relationship with her. Let her get to know you. He looked toward the door, reluctant. How long before I can take her home? If we expedite everything? Susan paused to consider. 3 months, maybe 4? Ethan exhaled. That's a long time for a little girl. Susan's voice was calm but certain. Yes, it is, but she's waited this long. She can wait a little longer for the right person. Ethan drove home thinking about the little girl who'd offered him a block, about the smile that had cracked something open in his chest, about the possibility of turning his empty house into a home. Over the next 3 months, Ethan's life changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He visited Amy every day, bringing books and toys and learning about her personality. She was quiet but determined, cautious but capable of deep affection once she trusted someone. He found himself looking forward to their visits, planning activities, thinking about what would make her happy. For the first time in years, he was focused on building something instead of destroying it. The paperwork moved through the system with surprising speed. Ethan's background checks came back clean. His home study was approved without issue. His financial evaluation confirmed he had more than enough resources to provide for a child. The psychological assessment, however, was a different story. "You've been through significant trauma," the psychologist said during their third session, studying Ethan from across the quiet, sunlit room. "Betrayal, divorce, the systematic collapse of your social network. That kind of experience leaves marks." "I'm not denying that," Ethan replied, leaning back in the chair, arms loosely folded. "But you're also showing remarkable resilience," she continued. "You've channeled your anger into structure. Focus. You've rebuilt your life on stronger foundations." "I had help," he said simply. The psychologist gave a small nod. "Yes, but you had to be willing to accept it. Let's talk about your decision to pursue custody of Amy." "She needs a home," Ethan said. "I have one." "It's more than that, though, isn't it?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "Maybe. I don't know. When I look at her, I see possibility. Hope. A chance to do something right. And when you look at yourself," she asked gently. "I see someone who's tired of being angry," Ethan said. "Someone who wants to build instead of destroy." She smiled. "That's growth, Mr. Cole. That's healing." "It doesn't feel like healing," he admitted. "It feels like starting over." "Sometimes," the psychologist said, "they're the same thing." The final court hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning in June. Ethan arrived early, wearing the same charcoal suit he'd worn to his divorce proceedings. But this time, the wait was different. This wasn't about endings. It was about beginnings. Susan Williams testified first, detailing Amy's needs and Ethan's unwavering commitment to meeting them. She spoke of his consistency, his preparedness, and the genuine bond he had already begun to form with the child. The judge listened, reviewing the case file with care. After a few procedural questions, she set the folder aside and looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice firm but kind, "you are hereby granted full legal custody of the minor child." She smiled, a rare warmth behind the bench. "Congratulations." That afternoon, Ethan brought Amy home. She was quiet at first, hesitant in the unfamiliar space. But as the minutes passed, curiosity began to win out over caution. He watched as she toddled from room to room, exploring her new world. Every detail had been carefully prepared. Child-proofed cabinets, soft rugs, safety gates, and a guest room transformed into a bright, welcoming nursery. As she stood in the center of her room, taking it all in, Ethan knelt beside her. "What do you think?" he asked gently. Amy didn't answer right away. She turned toward the window, then pointed with a tiny finger. "Tree," she said. Ethan smiled. It was one of her first words. "Yes, that's a tree," he confirmed. "Would you like to look at it?" He scooped her up and carried her to the window, holding her at just the right height. Outside, the massive oak in the backyard spread its branches wide, leaves rustling softly in the afternoon breeze. "Tree," Amy repeated with delight, and then giggled. Ethan laughed with her, the sound foreign and warm in his throat. That night, after Amy had fallen asleep in her new bed, Ethan sat on the couch in the quiet living room and dialed Marco's number. Marco picked up on the first ring. "How did it go?" "She's home," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "Exhausted, happy." There was a pause on the line. "Happy?" Marco asked, surprised. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." "You sound different," Marco observed. "I am different," Ethan replied. "I have to be. I'm responsible for someone else now." "You've been responsible for other people before," Marco reminded him. "Not like this," Ethan said. This is everything." There was a beat of silence before Marco said, "You're going to be a good father, Ethan." "I hope so. I know so," Marco replied firmly. "You've spent 2 years learning how to protect what matters. Now you get to learn how to love what matters." Ethan thought about that for a moment. "What's the difference?" "Protection is about fear," Marco said. "Love is about hope." After he hung up, Ethan walked to Amy's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She was curled up with a stuffed elephant he'd bought her dark hair spread across the pillow. Tomorrow, he would have to figure out daycare and pediatricians and all the logistics of raising a child. Tomorrow, he would have to learn how to be a father. But tonight, he was just a man who'd found his way back to hope.